Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting today to address the recent flooding events in Prince George's County. We're here today with federal, state, and local partners to help you understand your risk for flooding and what you can do to protect yourself. My name is Patty Dorn, and I'm with the Maryland Insurance Administration. I'll be your host today. Our presentations today will cover flood risk mapping and floodplain management, disaster preparedness and mitigation, as well as flood, homeowners, renters, and auto insurance. And most importantly, we're here today to get your questions answered. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the presentations, and you will be able to request a virtual breakout room for one-on-one assistance with issues particular to your own situation. A Spanish interpreter is available for individual insurance-related questions. So I'm going to quickly go over the rules of the event today for this town hall meeting. Your phones and the computers will be on mute for this event. We will start today with a welcome from Tyrone Wells, Operations Manager at the Prince George's County Office of Emergency Management, and then we'll launch into our presentations. If you already know that you want to ask a specific insurance question, you can request a breakout room. And what that means is that you'll have a chance to talk with a representative about your situation one-on-one in a room that's separate from everyone else. You may request that room now or at any time during this session by using the chat window. Your breakout room will start at the end of the presentation, and an invitation will appear on your screen to go to that breakout room. If you don't need one-on-one assistance in a virtual breakout room, please stick around after the presentations for a question and answer session with our presenters. If you find yourself in the question and answer session after you requested a breakout room, what that means is that we're waiting on a room to be available to you. If you decide you need a breakout room during the question and answer session, you can still send us a request and use the chat window to send us that request. When you leave your breakout room, you're going to be placed into the Q&A session. If you have any questions about this process, do not hesitate to go over to the chat window and ask us questions. This town hall meeting is being recorded. The breakout sessions are not recorded. Please leave your computers and your phones on mute. If you're attending this session on a phone, email and phone numbers for you to contact after the meeting will be available during the Q&A session. And this meeting today will end promptly at 7 p.m. With that, I would like to welcome Tyrone Wells of the Prince George's County Office of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Patty. I want to thank everyone for taking time out this evening to join us for this virtual town hall meeting. As you know, flooding is the #1 hazard in Prince George's County. After the September 10th flash flood event, we here at the Office of Emergency Management thought it was important for residents to not only learn more about their flood risk and insurance, but also learn more about preparing for floods and other natural hazards that the county is susceptible to. We hope the town hall provides everyone with some additional insight of the September 10th event, as well as urban flooding in general. Just a quick rundown of different steps that the Office of Emergency Management, or OEM, took following the September 10th flooding. In the immediate days afterwards, we began to interact with various municipalities, do some site visits, just in general of some of the impact that occurred in areas such as Mount Rainier, North Brentwood. Eventually, we, on the 14th of September, conducted a municipal phone call with various agencies, various county agencies and municipalities, and WSSC were involved in that. By the end of that week, on the 16th, we moved to create a damage assessment tool, an online tool that allowed residents the opportunity to provide us with some guidance on where damages were and do their own assessment based on the guidelines in the web tool on what they thought their level of damage was. This tool was intended to solely be a way for us to have a little better guidance on where damages may be so that we can carry out some initial damage assessments. This damage assessment was to help us understand the viability of pursuing relief through FEMA. If certain benchmarks were not met, then that effort would not have been beneficial. So that was the intent of the damage tool. And we had over 300 people provide us with feedback on that tool, which in turn led us to working with the state to come out and conduct some initial damage assessments. We wanted to do a sampling of damage, both in different communities or areas or zip codes, however you want to interpret that, as well as different parts of the county to better understand the overall individual impact, community impact, and other factors that the state would have to evaluate in order to work with us to pursue what's called individual assistance. At the end of that process of inspecting well over 100 homes or a sampling of doing initial damage assessments in those properties, it was determined that that process would not really take us any further. The level of property damage was just not there, even though many individuals would feel differently when we have to look at it in overall scope of the community and the individual amount of damage per home. We were just not getting or able to bring together a meaningful or it just wasn't going to work with what we were finding, unfortunately. And that was, that in turn led us to seeking other areas of assistance, which we've now engaged with some voluntary organizations that may help, have offered assistance to people who have been impacted and have signed up with them. It's called the Crisis Cleanup Hotline, in order to seek assistance in continuing to clean out their homes or do some initial remediation that may be required to eliminate mold or other hazards after your water's been impacted by after your home has been impacted by water. So that is where the process is at this time. And that's somewhat of an overview of how the Office of Emergency Management worked through the process of networking with or collaborating with municipalities, collaborating with the state and other agencies such as the state agencies that are on the line to try to identify the best road forward. General disaster tips that we wanted to remind people of regarding flooding. It's no more than the normal actions that people are encouraged to take with securing outdoor areas, removing things that may be damaged if you are to get flooding on your property, doing things on the exterior of your homes that will improve the ability for water to move away from the home and not towards it. And people who have a history of minor flooding in and around their home, some actions of making in both landscaping and improvements inside your home, sump pumps, other actions that may balance your home's ability to move water away from it and not have standing water in or around your home. So those are just some very basic things we want to keep reminding people of. You'll hear more about it during this presentation. I think I'm going back to you now, Patty.
Joyce, did you? The next speaker.
Yes, it's time for the
Okay.
next speaker. Okay, so next we're going to have a joint presentation by Dawn and Kevin, and they're going to talk about the flood risk and mitigation in the floodplains. So I think, Dawn, you're going first. If you could briefly just introduce yourself. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Joy. My name is Dawn Hawkins-Nixon. I work for Prince George's County Department of the Environment. And our agency is responsible for flood management in terms of planning and compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. One of our specific activities is floodplain mapping and flood study analysis. So this evening, I'm going to share with you information about flood risk and understanding that knowledge is power in terms of knowing what your risks are. This knowledge does not necessarily protect you from flood damage, but it will help you to understand where the sources of flooding are and how to protect your properties from flood damage, the risk of flood damage. So I'm going to move forward with sharing my screen and walk you through the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. And I hope you all can see my screen. Okay, wonderful. Do the full, all right. So there are basically three common types of flooding. This is riverine flooding, coastal flooding, and flash flooding. What we saw on September 10th is considered flash flooding. It happens quickly. There's a very intense amount of rainfall that occurs in a short period of time. When it comes to flash flooding, anywhere in the county, you can be at risk for flash flooding. If there is terrain that's a little higher than where you live or work, just by the mere fact that you are at a lower elevation than that higher terrain, you're at risk for flash flooding, because if a storm cell falls or opens up at that higher level, the water is going to run down to your property. And if there's a lot of water coming down, then that means there's a lot of water running into your property in a short amount of time. When it comes to coastal flooding, properties that are located along the shorelines of the rivers, Potomac River or Patuxent River, are susceptible to coastal flooding. Riverine flooding occurs when the water levels exceed the banks of a stream, a river, a creek, a branch that may otherwise run at maybe a foot or so depth level. When the rainstorms come and the rain continues for an extended period of time, the water is going to eventually run into these creeks, into these streams, into these rivers, and the volume will cause the water level to rise and overtop the banks. So persons living or working in the nearby banks, or maybe not so nearby banks of the river or other waterway, will be prone to riverine flooding. And in Prince George's County, yeah, we're susceptible to all these three different types of general types of flood risk. So the county has worked with FEMA to define riverine flood hazard areas in the county. You'll see this bright green polygon or bright green shaded area along the Anacostia River. That bright green area is the limits of the floodplain per the flood insurance rate map. The purple area is the floodplain area as defined by the Prince George's County Stormwater Management study. So you might ask, why is there a difference in those floodplain areas? Well, the FEMA floodplain is defined based on existing land use conditions. So the latest FEMA map was completed in September of 2016. Our flood analysis that supported or defined these flood limits were done maybe a year or two prior to 2016, but the estimates of the flow volume and the depth of water within the river were based on existing land use conditions at the time that the analysis was done. With regard to the purple area, the flood analysis, the flow volumes, and the depths of flooding are based on ultimate land use conditions. So the floodplain for the stormwater management studies, the purplish areas, take into account the runoff amounts that are expected based on ultimate build out of the watershed that drains to these particular streams or this particular river and tributary. And our office makes these maps, the related elevations of flooding, available to anyone who wants that information. With regard to coastal flooding, with the 2016 issued flood insurance rate maps, coastal flood areas were defined along the Patuxent River. So you will see kind of midway of the map, you'll see text that says limit of moderate wave action. So these flood hazard areas are reflective of riverine flood limits with the addition of the wave action and the extent of the wave, I guess, influence into the land area during the event of, I don't know, typically it's during a hurricane or a tropical storm or something like that, when we actually see the surge occur and the waves running up and into land areas. But prior to the 2016 flood insurance rate map approval, we did not have coastal flood hazard areas defined on the FEMA map. But FEMA did include these areas along the Patuxent River in 2016. And the areas are pretty much regulated in much of the same way that the riverine flood hazard areas are regulated, but there are a little bit more restrictions in those limited wave action areas. When it comes to flash flooding, surface water flooding, as I noted earlier, just about anywhere in the county, persons could be subjected to flash flooding. You will see a very fine red arrow on my map. And the intent of that arrow is to show the direction of flow from a high point, ground level, down to the lower elevations. That arrow, oops, sorry about that. That arrow shows you the path of flow when a significant amount of rainfall would occur on that 175. That's the hill, 175. The rainwater that hits that hill, it has to flow downhill. And if there's a lot of rain that hits that hill, there's going to be quite a bit of rain flowing in the direction of that arrow. And everything in its path is going to feel and see the effect of that significant amount of water flowing down that hill. You'll see persons who experience flash flooding will see flooding of roadways. They will see floodings of backyards. And many times we'll get the question, why didn't the storm drains intercept the flow? Why didn't the ponds intercept the flow? Well, it's standard practice to design your storm drain system for a certain storm event. The systems aren't designed to carry extreme events, but in the wake of climate change, you know, we're kind of being forced to think about how we manage these intense short duration storms. So climate change and the more frequent storms are kind of forcing us or challenging us to think about how we move forward with flood management. So, you know, I want to say a little bit about how to reduce your risk for damage and how to reduce your risk for injury. We've all heard that slogan, turn around, don't drown, don't drown. These are a few pictures, some kind of recent, of flooding events where, you know, emergency services have to go out and they have to rescue persons who, you know, are caught in crosswaters when, you know, attempting to drive down a road that's flooded. Sometimes the events happen too quickly, right? They happen too quickly. You don't know you're going to be out in the middle of a storm where the road floods. And these type of incidents happen, but when there are forecasted storm events and you know that a street in your community is in the process of flooding, avoid taking that risk of trying to drive through it, because these waters rise very quickly and the force of the water is really stronger than it looks. It will knock a vehicle, a pedestrian off their path. So we really encourage people to avoid trying to drive through flooded streets. My last slide has to do with some of the actions that property owners can take to reduce flood damage to their property. So some simple actions would be to look at your downspouts and make sure that you have that splash pad at the foot of the downspout, and that the splash pad is moving the water away from the foundation of your house. If it doesn't move it away from the foundation of your house, the water will settle around your house. And if it settles around your house, there's potential for the water to start seeping into the walls of your house, which would cause flooding, and also affect your foundation. If you have a basement and you have window wells, think about putting a canopy over that window well to protect it from flood waters or rainfall getting into that window well and seeping into your basement. If you're proposing to do any type of yard improvement, big yard project, always keep in mind you have to keep positive drainage away from your house. So you want the land around your house to always slope away from the house toward a swale, toward a storm drain, or something of that nature. Otherwise, you're going to have water ponding in your yard and in your house. And lastly, we do promote the use of what we call green infrastructure. Trees are a natural measure for controlling stormwater. Vegetation, plants are very good at capturing and retaining stormwater. So, you know, the county does offer rebates for planting trees and for installing rain gardens. I encourage everyone to look into that rain check rebate. If you have a drainage problem and you have space in your yard, think about implementing one of these measures to help reduce flooding. Right? And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn.
Sure, I don't know. Trying to stop sharing here.
And then with that, our next speaker is going to be Donald Waters from the National Flood Insurance Program.
I think I was.
Actually, Patty, the next speaker is going to be Kevin Wagner, because he's going to be talking about the same sort of issues from the state's perspective.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. I know we threw a loop there for you, but I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for attending this evening. I'm going to expand upon some of the things that Dawn had already talked about and Tyrone had mentioned in his introduction. So with that, I am going to share my screen. And see if I can put it in presenter mode here. Shoot. Okay, everybody can see my intro slide. I know we have about 50 participants that are not viewing this via video, so I will do my best to explain things as we go along. But my understanding is we will be sharing out this slide deck, so you can always take a look at it later. But you know, I'm glad to help with any contact information. I left my information in the chat box. My name is Kevin Wagner. I provide community assistance related to the National Flood Insurance Program. I happen to work for Maryland Department of the Environment. We do a lot of things to protect Maryland's air, water, and land resources. So my focus is specifically related to floodplain management, and I help a variety of stakeholders. So I'm always happy to help citizens and licensed professionals and elected officials and anybody that needs it with questions about, you know, some issues related to flooding, how to respond to it, and how the National Flood Insurance Program ties into that. So I don't need to repeat all this stuff. You know, you're already aware of causes of flooding. We're going to get to the meat of it, like what do we do about it? You know, how are we going to combat it? But obviously you're seeing increased precipitation events causing these phenomenons known as urban flooding, where the storm systems just get backed up. We have impervious area, cars get flooded, which we're going to touch on some of that information tonight. Dawn mentioned coastal areas in the Potomac River, Patuxent River. So we do have areas that see storm surge and tidal issues and other things. But mostly it's riverine and flash flooding. But I do want to point out that there's other types of flooding that you may have dealt with before. including water main breaks, which can qualify as a flood as long as it impacts two different properties, one of which is not yours. And then, of course, some sewer backups and related issues. So urban flooding, as I mentioned, is becoming a lot more prevalent now, and we're all at the federal, state, and local level trying to figure out ways to kind of combat it. You know, we already have a built-out environment, so we need to start figuring out ways for retaining water, whether it's green roofs or cisterns or things like that. Nuisance flooding is more on the tidal and coastal side. So these are things that cause public inconvenience. I believe the county is or has worked on a nuisance flood plan, but that kind of highlights areas of concern and things that they're looking to do. The water main break, to me, it became known to me several years back in Baltimore City. Of course, we know these things happen from time to time, the pipes burst. But when that water, that surface water, then enters into your house, that causes flood damage. And so it may not be a storm event per se, but this could be something that is covered by flood insurance. So to give you a little bit more, umbrella about floodplain management and things like that. So what we try to do, and what the federal government, state government, local government tries to do, is we implement a floodplain management program through the National Flood Insurance Program. So it's a partnership between the federal government and the community, in this case, Prince George's County, as well as the city of Laurel, are participating communities. So they have these programs that, using the FEMA mapping that Dawn had mentioned, is kind of the minimum. Many of them go beyond that. But the idea is to do a holistic view of land use, and hopefully over time we start to see a reduction of these things. Unfortunately, though, we have a lot of building stock that was built before a lot of this mapping and things took effect. So now we're kind of trying to figure out ways to deal with it. So there's different mitigation grants and things like that that we'll talk, I think the county's going to get into later. But just understand it's kind of a partnership between the community and FEMA. So I'm going to quickly kind of go around this circle that I have about know your risk, reduce your risk, and insure your risk. Dawn's already done a great job talking about the maps and some of the information. I'm going to focus more on the floodplain management and mitigation aspect, but also highlight flood insurance as a possible way to assist. And then Donald Waters and team with FEMA are going to talk more about flood insurance. So as Dawn mentioned, the flood insurance rate maps are kind of our minimum tool, but obviously we're seeing flooding that is occurring outside those areas. So it's kind of helps to kind of implement the program, but of course, what other tools are out there? We're looking at county has their own county floodplain, for example. So that's one tool that we can use. But projections, high water marks, things like that, you all know where flooding is happening. So even if you're not required to carry flood insurance, we want you to strongly consider it. So the firm obviously does certain things. It looks at those big events, those 100-year events that we've heard about, the 500-year events. But flooding doesn't always follow the map boundary, as we know. But this is the national standard. This is what the program is based on for insurance rating and development review and management purposes. But we can always kind of do better. There's different tools that you can access. Maryland has a mapping site. Sounds like the county does as well. So I'd probably encourage you to use that one first, but mdfloodmaps.net is a place that you can go where you can type in your address and get a sense of how the FEMA mapping impacts you. The FEMA Map Service Center website, msc.fema.gov, is another great place to go. You can do the same thing, enter your address and be able to pull up a map, and it shows very similar information. And you can't see it, but this is a picture of a ferment, what it would look like if you get through the FEMA tool. So there's various zones on those maps. As Dawn had mentioned, we focus on those high-risk areas, the Zone A, the Zone AH, AO, AE. These are high-risk A zones. And then in the coastal areas, I don't remember if Prince George's County has any on at least the southern part of the county, but there's these coastal velocity zones, the VE zones. Dawn did mention the limited moderate wave action where there's still some wave energy and things happen. But in those high-risk areas, is where the mandatory purchase requirement for flood insurance comes into play if you have a federally backed loan. And it's also where regulatory requirements will come into play if you're doing a construction project, that sort of thing. So moving around the circle, know your risk, we hit the mapping. Now we're moving on to reduce your risk. Floodplain management, we kind of start with regulations. You know, these are the things that we don't like to deal with, but they really kind of establish the framework of when you're doing a new project, these are certain minimum things that you have to do. So a lot of this is all based within Prince George's County Floodplain Ordinance. It's in their county code, subtitle 32, I think it is. But that's kind of the meat of where these regulatory requirements come into play. But it's also being picked up by the building code. There's certain flood provisions in the code there. I did want to say that, you know, there's certain things we could do that go beyond the minimum. So FEMA might say, whatever numbers on the map, you elevate your new home to that elevation. We always encourage people to go even higher, do more. So we call that freeboard when you go higher. And freeboard can save you money. You get up, when you get up to about 3 feet or more, you get to a point of kind of diminishing returns, but you can see significant savings. So just something to keep in mind as you're doing renovation projects, as you're rebuilding. Think about how maybe you can build in a way that's going to be more resilient in the future. So a couple of things that you can do from a flood mitigation standpoint. So again, I'm moving around the circle here. Know your risk, reduce your risk. Focusing on mitigation techniques. So using flood damage resistant materials, flood openings, backflow for prevention, elevating utilities, fuel tanks, anchoring those. The accessory structures and sheds that are outside our homes, anchoring those. There's a lot of different grants that I'm not going to get into, but I think the county might talk about. But flood insurance could be a good mitigation sort of tool. At least gives you something to help you recover a little faster. So I'm going to quickly talk about each one of these. So flood damage resistant materials, there's a couple of different great materials out there, and there's some not so great. So cement board, brick tile, marine grade plywood, sprayed polyurethane foam, these are all good things. If they get soggy and wet, they're going to resist mold and mildew and that sort of thing. Things like gypsum board, green board, carpeting, OSB, which is that oriented strand board sheathing, and fiberglass insulation, that is not so good stuff. So maybe if things get damaged, first of all, you know, document everything. But then get it out there, get it out as soon as possible so it doesn't promote mold growth. But as you rebuild, think about using different types of products. Flood openings are things that are, when you're in a flood zone, and if you have a crawl space, for example, you would put these openings in and they minimize the pressure on the walls. They're really important if you're in that flood zone for insurance purposes, for flood insurance purposes. So there's certain requirements there, but they help to balance that flood pressure on the walls and let the water go in and out. Just a couple of graphics I have here in the presentation, but improper flood openings can often result in higher flood insurance. So I know a lot of you that were impacted by the September flooding were not in a flood zone, so this wouldn't be a practical thing. So just information for those that might be. Here's some things that would be helpful for those that were not in a zone, like backflow prevention valves. So these are things that prevent the water from backing up through county systems, city systems, back through your drains and into your house. So they just basically one wave sort of valves. I have a picture here of like an elevated HVAC unit. So this is just an example of what we could do if we know that we have flooding. Let's elevate these things on platforms if we can, instead of just putting them on the ground. Other types of utilities in the house, for example, we got the HVAC systems, the water heaters, all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's impractical to try to elevate it, but another thing that you could do if you can't elevate it on blocks is you could build barriers in the basement to help prevent water from getting into them. So elevate as high as you can, I guess, but if you can't, there's other techniques for sort of dry flood proofing those utilities, which could be a great mitigation measure. Fuel tanks, we see this a lot, that if these things aren't adequately anchored, they can become buoyant, they flip over. And if you got heating oil, it causes a lot of environmental damage and health implications, more importantly. So anchoring these fuel tanks, preventing the waters from getting into that oil. You know, there's seals that you can use with the caps is also a good thing. That is very expensive heating oil. So on the outside, we got propane tanks. So those could be anchored by ground anchors. Fuel oil tanks on the outside could also be anchored by ground anchors. But it's important those vent pipes are extended above any kind of flood elevation. So again, water doesn't get in it. Accessory structures, so the sheds and those things behind our houses, anchoring those is really important, because if they're not, we have a lot of situations where the water will pick these things up and float them down, and then they cause other property damage or block up bridges or culverts or things like that. And then lastly, moving around the circle, insuring your risk, which I'm not going to go great detail because I don't want to steal FEMA's thunder, but check with your agent. You know, there's different types of coverage depending on building and contents. It's available to anybody because Prince George's County and the city of Laurel participate. Anybody can purchase it. Doesn't matter if you're in a high-risk zone or not. There's just different criteria that goes into the rating. I'm not going to get into all of that, but if you're not in a high-risk zone, you can purchase a policy for as little as $325 a year. And then finally, I wanted to mention that the county is in the community rating system. It's kind of the varsity team of the National Flood Insurance Program. So because of their participation, people can receive up to a 25% reduction in their flood insurance. Obviously, there's certain caveats. The majority of the risk is focused on those high-risk flood hazard areas, but areas just outside may get a reduction as well. You can't see all these, but there's publications we'll share with you when we share the slides. One of my favorite is the FEMA Protect Your Home from Flooding, low-cost projects you can do yourself. And it does a great job kind of giving you an idea of things that you can do. It doesn't seem like things like installing a rain barrel would be very effective in these big events. But if you think about it from a watershed perspective, if everybody can kind of get on board with this, it will make a difference. But there's things you can do inside the home, things you can do outside the home. Tyrone mentioned the sump pumps, which is a great way if you have basements, and also having a battery backup for those sump pumps would be very important. So that's all I have. I know it took more time than I should have, but we'll look for questions in the chat box, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. And next up, we have Donald Waters with the National Flood Insurance Program.
Good afternoon. Wow. Let me see if I can follow Kevin. I like the way he presented his. Oh my. I'm having an issue here looking for my presentation. Ooh. Okay, so that's not working. Hold on, please.
Don, it looks like your
I'm sorry?
your screen was up. All you had to do was hit the tab where your presentation was.
Oh, okay. I apologize for that, for not being prepared. Actually, that's not it.
Oh, we appreciate you being here.
Well, okay. I think that's it. Share. It's not sharing. Okay, so I'm going to have to do.
It's up,
It's
Donald.
there. It's there.
It's there.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, because I don't see that. All right, so anyway, I'm with the National Flood Insurance Program, FEMA, and I am the claims branch chief for FEMA, and we handle the National Flood Insurance Program. And just to give you a little background on exactly what it is. So, so you see my second slide? Yes?
Yep, it's up.
Yep. Yes.
Wow, this is interesting because I don't see this. So anyway,
Aw.
okay, so anyway, the National Flood Insurance Program has kind of like two programs, if you will. It has what we call the Write Your Own program, and it has the NFIP program. The Write Your Own part of the program for the National Flood Insurance Program, those are insurance companies like Allstate, and I know some of the people that had an issue in September had probably a policy with Allstate, Assurant, or American Bankers, and some of the other companies that are basically the 100, just companies that everybody's familiar with, who sells all the other policies that they would probably need. And along with that, FEMA has its own insurance company, which is what we call the National Flood Insurance Direct Program. And this is FEMA's program where they sell insurance and provide service for the policyholders for the NFIP, and manages the policies and take care of the claims and things like that. So these are the two programs that we would basically be servicing, and that most policyholders can purchase. And as already stated, you can have flood insurance if the community is participating in the program. You can have flood insurance and get it from any agent who sells property insurance. So the National Flood Insurance Program have what we call standard flood insurance policies. And there are three policies. We say one policy, but in three forms. But we have a dwelling form, a general property form, which is our commercial property, and also a residential condominium building association, or the RCBAP. And most policies that we sell are the dwelling policy forms. It's a single family policy, and it covers from 2 to 4 family dwellings. So that's usually what most people will have. Our policy limits are set by statute. And when we say by statute, we're talking Congress. So the most that you could get for a single family dwelling policy in the National Flood Insurance Program is $250,000. The most contents coverage that you could get in the National Flood Insurance Program is $100,000. For general property form, you can get up to $500,000 with $500,000 in contents. That's usually our manufacturing type companies or commercial type buildings and things like that. With the RCBAP, or the Residential Condominium Building Association policy form, there we sell $250,000 policies times the number of units. So if you got $250,000 times 30 units, then multiply it, and that's the kind of coverage that we would have. It also has $100,000 worth of contents coverage as well. And I'd like to just bring to this point up as well. So there's no independent adjuster that works for the National Flood Insurance Program. Most of the independent adjusters that will come out and service the policy or a claim, they actually work for the companies, either the Allstates, the American Bankers or Assurant, or the NFIP. They have a contract with them, and their job is to come out and write the policy. And most people think that, they try to undermine or lowball policyholders. These are independent contractors. And what that means is they get paid for the amount of damages that they write and that they see when they come out. So it would only benefit them if they write the amount of coverage, the amount of damages that they see. And one of the things that we do when we have claims presentations where we talk to the adjusters and we explain to them our expectations from FEMA, that what we would like. And the message is every policyholder should get every dime or dollar under the policy that they're entitled to for their damages. And the adjusters do not have the authority to approve a claim or deny a claim. Only a company can do that. All they can do is make a recommendation to the companies on the damages that they saw or the damages that they saw that was not covered by the National Flood Insurance Program. Again, we talked about the amount of coverages. We've already seen that. Apologize for that. Am I going backwards? I am going backwards. We have 3 standard policies, as we suggested earlier. And we're in the process now of taking a look at these and writing what's going on with that. We have an agreement. When you open up the policy, the first thing you're going to see is an agreement. The agreement is between you and basically FEMA. Even though the policy is sold by Allstate, the agreement is still with FEMA. And if you look at it closely, you will see that every single word in the standard flood insurance policy, regardless of what company it's sold by, is the same exact policy that you will see from any other company, because they are all FEMA's policy if they are from the NFIP. We have an agreement. The agreement says that we will pay you for direct physical loss by or from flood to your insured property if you have paid the correct premiums, complied with all the terms, conditions of the policy, and have furnished accurate information. Now, in most cases, when you buy a policy from the NFIP, there's what we call a 30-day wait period. So you get a policy, you wait 30 days, and then the policy becomes effective. Unless, of course, you take out a mortgage on that, or a loan, or federally backed loan, and then it becomes effective immediately. So since we're here today, we're going to talk about floods. That's the only peril that the standard flood insurance policy has, the peril of flooding. And flooding is defined by, and we're real clear about this, a general and temporal condition of partial or complete inundation of 2 or more acres of normally dry land area, or 2 or more properties, one of which is yours, from an overflow of land, inland tidal water, or from unusual and rapid accumulation of runoff surface from any source. And as the speaker prior to me, Howard says, if it's a water main break, it's considered a flood, because the street floods and your property floods, that's 2 properties. Therefore, we have what we call a general condition of flooding. And that's what we would have to have in order for a claim to be covered in the National Flood Insurance Program. Another general condition of flooding is if the neighbor's swimming pool is being filled and it overflows and go into your house, onto your property, there again, we have what is called a general condition of flooding. Now, the conditions must be general. They also must be temporary, which means that the water comes on your property and you can tell the date, the time, the location, and the exact day it was. Can't see my own lighting over here. Occurrence must also be accidental and must touch your property. And in most cases, we did have that on September 10th, 2020. Also, one of the other definitions for a flood is a mud flow. So mud flow, erosions, sudden erosion on a riverbank, things like that. Also, one of the things that's important that one must understand when we talk about the National Flood Insurance Program is abasement. We have definitions. Our definitions are unique to the National Flood Insurance Program, and a lot of times they make no sense to a lot of other people. So we have what is called abasement. And abasement for the National Flood Insurance Program, any area of a building, including any sunken room or sunken portion of a room, having the floor below ground level on all sides. And that's really, really important to understand. By the way, I just moved my presentation over. Did that mess anything up? Can you still see the presentation?
Yes, we can still see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I couldn't see where it was. You know, I'm old these days. I can't see much of anything. So, sorry. And when we say a basement, we mean an area below ground. And in this picture, everybody can relate this basement picture. The only thing that wouldn't be covered in a basement would be your personal property or your contents and things like that. Or there are certain items that's covered down there, like your oil tanks and things of that nature. And remember the definition of a basement: below ground level on all sides. All sides. So when this person who owns this particular property right here, when they step those 2 steps or 3 steps down so they could look at the television, if that area is below ground level on all sides, we now have a basement. And what that means to us at the NFIP, that means that that personal property in that location would not be covered, because we don't cover personal property in a basement. So and nor do we wouldn't cover the couch or any of those things that's down in that area. Nor the flooring down in that area would not be covered. We just would not cover those type things in that type of an area. And we show this slide to show you that basements can be all kind of different. We can see all type of buildings that are basements. In this particular case, what we like to show you is there was a cutout here. Whoever built this house actually cut out this area in front and made this garage and all of those things. So just when you get, those are things that are just unique to the National Flood Insurance Program. And a lot of people really don't like those kinds of things.
Donald, you need to advance your slides. We're still on the one that gives the definition of a basement.
Oh, see, so it's not really working. Okay, this is really not working very well for me. So I've got to figure out how to do this properly. I apologize, everybody. Oh, you could see it, you just couldn't see me taking it forward, huh? Okay, hold on. As you can see, this is the first time I've done Zoom with the presentation. So, and we do Zoom all day long, so I apologize for this. What's this, the guy before me, he made this thing look so easy. Okay, what do you see now? Nothing?
Okay, now the wording is definition of a basement, and the picture beside it is a small white home.
Okay, it should be definition of a building.
Oh, yes, definition of a building, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so I'm back in business. Okay, that's definition of a building. And a building in the National Flood Insurance Program is a structure with 2 or more rigid walls and a fully secured roof that is affixed to a permanent site. So, so the presenter that was on prior to me was telling you about a shed, and a shed could be 2 rigid walls, a roof, but if that shed is not secured and it floats down the street, then that would not be a covered that would not be covered in the National Flood Insurance Program, just so you know. We like to talk about the described location. Our described location in the National Flood Insurance Program is on the deck page. It is 1405 3rd Street. If that's what's on the deck sheet, that's the house that we're going to be covering, okay? And it's not always the mailing address, okay? Direct physical loss by or from flood. The loss has to be a physical loss by or from flood in order for there to be coverage. And there has to be evidence of damage. What do we mean by evidence of damage? We would have to have all adjusters that come out from the National Flood Insurance Program. The first thing they do is they go and they take pictures. We want to see a water line around the dwelling or inside the risk. We want to make sure that water was on that risk and that we can tell it. And you will normally see right after the flood is receded, there's a line that we see, a distinct line, and that will give us that physical changes and will give us the idea that we definitely have a general condition of flooding and that we can handle it. So just want you to know. So we talk about buildings and extensions. So one of the things about buildings and extension, we have a building and it's attached by a roof or an elevator walkway from one house from one structure to the next. If that structure is connected with one of those additions, then you can have one policy and we can cover both buildings with the $250,000 because at the policyholder's suggestion. So we could do it by a roof, an elevator walkway, a rigid exterior rigid wall, a low barren wall, or stairs. So if we have 2 buildings with these additions or extensions, we could have one policy and the policyholder can suggest that they want that policy to take care of whichever building is damaged at the time. And if both buildings are damaged, they'll have up to $250,000 worth of coverage. For detached garage, the standard flood insurance policy will cover one detached garage up to 10% of coverage A, which is the building coverage, as long as that detached garage is not being held or used for residential, for farming, and for business. So we like to make sure that we cover that. And usually when we cover the standard flood insurance policy, there's like 17 items that is covered, and they're listed. Everything is listed on the policy, inside the policy there. Everything that we're going to cover, that it's listed there. And the last thing that we will cover is the cleanup. And we cover cleanup. Even in the basement, we will cover cleanup. But what we cover has to be covered by, there has to be covered flood damage. So what that would mean is if we're down in a basement and you had a basement damage and you have the right amount of coverage down there and your deductible will allow us to come down and pay you for things, we would do some cleanup in the basement if the oil tank spilled over, whatever it was. But the personal property that you would have in that basement would not be covered. So we would do cleanup, but we would not clean up things that's not covered by the policy. And I hope that makes some sense. And property that's not covered, we don't cover farm animals and all types of walkways and decks, driveways. We do not do walks. We don't cover fences, seawalls, piers, docks, trees, shrubs. There's a list of things that we would not cover. And usually those things are outside the perimeter of the house. And so those items are not covered. We also have what we call exclusions. And some of the exclusions that we have, we cover things directly as a result of flooding, but we do not cover loss of revenue, loss of access to the property, loss of interruption of businesses and additional living, and any other economic loss. But some of the lists also state that we would not cover things like sewage backup, and I keep going backwards, sewage backup and things like that. However, if there is a general condition in the area, then some things like sewage backup or seepage and things of that nature perhaps will be covered. But we would have to, the adjuster's job is to survey the neighborhood and to talk to other residents and other people and even if they're not insured, but just to confirm that that neighborhood had a general condition of flooding and the policyholder's home was part of that flooding, that 2 or more acres or property, the insurance policy, property, and the street and things of that nature, then we would be able to cover it. So it's important that if you had like sewage backup or seepage, that we would have to make sure that the neighborhood suggests that yes, or the community or the town or those streets or wherever the policyholder was, did have a general condition of flooding. We do not insure directly or indirectly for loss caused already in progress at the time of the policy. Basically, this statement says that if you buy a policy and there's a flood already going on, or you have 30 days before your policy become effective, and if any time between the day you bought the policy and the 30th day for this policy to become effective, this is what we call a loss in progress, and there would not be any coverage for that particular loss. Remedies after.
Hello?
Yeah, okay. Prior to signing a remediation contract, we ask the policyholders to consult their adjuster or their insurance company before if they have a flood, before the different companies come out to take care of your flooding with remediation and having you sign something and putting a lien on your house. Please make sure you contacted your insurance companies so they could advise you as to what to do with that. Exclusion. We talked about water backup and sewage and discharge from sun pumps. Unless there is a flood in the area, and that is the approximate cause of the damages. And if that's the case, then we do have some issues with that. Okay. pollutants, and we do not cover testing for pollutants, but the National Flood Insurance Program will cover pollutants if, in fact, the community says or someone says that yes, you do have some there's a pollutant in your dwelling, or we'll take care of any oil or things like that down in your basement. We will cover it up to policy limits. However, with the general property policy or commercial property, we would only cover it up to $10,000 would be the amount of coverage that we would pay for pollutants on your property or in your property. Deductibles. The National Flood Insurance Program is unique in a lot of ways. And one of the other ways that it's really unique is if you have personal property, you would have a deductible. And if you have dwelling coverage, you would have a deductible. And also, you do not get personal property when you purchase a policy with the National Flood Insurance Program. You would also have to purchase the contents coverage as well. It's really important that everybody understands that when an adjuster comes out, his job is to write as much damage as he can possibly write and what he sees. And the National Flood Insurance Program believes that there may be some damage wherever, but unless the adjuster can document and photograph and prove that those items are damaged, then he's actually not able to write that. But he's able to write whatever there is that he can write. And the important thing that we want everybody to understand is when an adjuster comes out, he writes an estimate. And that's all it is. It's just an estimate. And the estimate is about the damages that he saw the day that he came out to do an inspection. And if there are additional damages once the contractor is there and he sees that there are other items that are damaged as a result of the storm, then we are responsible for paying the policyholders all the damages that they got as a result of this event. And so therefore, we have what we call request for additional payment, or RAP. And so if you have a contractor and he buys things, or you purchase things to repair the damages because they were damaged as a result of that flood, and you submit that to your carrier, you shouldn't have a problem with getting a reimbursement for the damages that's caused as a result of that flood. And if you do, please let us know. And if you do have a problem with your claim, and if you don't feel that you were treated properly as a result of your claim, the National Flood Insurance Program, or FEMA, has instituted what we call an appeals process. And you have 60 days from the date of your denial letter to forward it to your insurance carrier and explain explicitly exactly what it is that you feel that happened that you should be taken care of, that should be taken care of. That you cannot write, I did not get enough money for my claim. You have to tell us what it is that you didn't get enough money for. The contractor had to do this, or once the contractor opened up the walls, we found additional damages to ABC, and take pictures of it, call the insurance carrier, you can let them know. Now, adjuster may come back out, but you have to prove to the appeals branch that yes, there are other items that were not taken care of in my claim, and that they should be able to investigate that and to take care of those claims for you. And you have every right to make sure that you get everything that you should be getting. And the insurance companies are open for that, and FEMA has no problems with that at all. But make sure that your appeal is eligible. Make sure it's within the 60 days. Make sure that you get that denial letter from the carrier. If they say something is not covered, tell them that you want it in writing. You need a denial letter to take care of that. And then you would have to write the appeal to FEMA directly. And then everything that we do, when you get a claim, you should get a insurance handbook with all the information in the handbook on where to submit your claim. When you get a denial letter from the companies or the carriers, they'll identify the address and all the information that you need in order to file an appeal. Hopefully your claims would be done properly and timely, but just in case they're not, then please go ahead and do an appeal. And I just wanted to make sure I highlighted some things that that you suggested. So these are some of the questions that you have, and I hope that I answered them. And if not, me and my team, we will be available to get into a chat room to discuss these things with you. I apologize for any confusion or the movement of my slides, and I will practice more, Joy, so that I can do a much better job the next time. And thank you so much for inviting us to come in to talk to the residents. I live in Prince George County, so you know I don't have a problem with being here. And I just thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. Our next speaker is Associate Commissioner Joy Hatchett from Maryland Insurance Administration.
You're on mute, Joy.
Good call, Kevin.
Struggling to get my slideshow up. Give me a 1 second.
She's got this.
Is the slideshow up?
Not yet.
Hmm.
And everybody, thank you so much for these questions that you're putting into the Q&A. They will get addressed, or into the chat, and they will get addressed during the Q&A. So thanks everyone, keep them coming.
Is it up now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So thank you all. And I am not going to go through all of my slides because we've heard a lot of information this evening. Instead, what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about who we are at the Maryland Insurance Administration, and then address a lot of the questions that different consumers from Prince George's County have asked us. So first and foremost, for those of you who do not know us, we are the state agency that regulates the insurance industry. We're the ones that make sure that basically anytime you have an issue or a problem with an insurance company, you can come to us and we can try to help you. And it's for all types of insurance, your auto, your home, your life, or your health. And it's my unit's responsibility to try to help educate consumers, because it's our belief that if you understand and know a little bit about the product that you're purchasing beforehand, then you're making sure that you have the product that will cover you. In fact, you do have a claim, because for a lot of people, I know you've had some issues with flooding and things in the past, and there are lots of assumptions that you have the right policy, when in fact, if you just had a little bit more information, you would have made some different decisions. So what we're going to do is try to clean up a little bit of that information. And so I want to start with, we got questions actually about automobiles. And we get this with there's flooding all the time. Your car is parked in front of your home and you come out the next morning and it's flooded. And so you think, oh, well, that's okay. My insurance policy, my automobile insurance policy will cover that flood damaged vehicle. Well, in order for there to be coverage, you have to have comprehensive coverage. And Maryland law requires that you have liability coverage and coverage for other, the damage that you cause to others. But it does not require you to have coverage for things like flooding, theft, vandalism, glass breakage, or when a vehicle strikes you. And now's the perfect time. Everybody's driving around and there are deer everywhere. So just remember that if you have flood coverage, if you have a flooding and that damages your vehicle, if you do not have comprehensive coverage, your vehicle will not be covered. So let's talk about homeowners insurance. So The main thing you need to understand is that flooding is not covered under most homeowners insurance policies. Let me repeat that. Flooding is not covered under homeowners insurance. Now, there are a couple of circumstances that you can buy a different type of homeowners policy, and we'll get that later on. But 99% of the people that have a homeowners insurance policy, if they have flooding, it's not going to be covered. So what types of things does your homeowners policy cover? It covers things that are considered like perils. So if you have damage because of the wind, or if a tree falls on your house, or if you have water sewer backup, those are the types of things that your homeowner's policy covers. So it gets a little bit complicated though. So let's just say that I do have water sewer backup coverage, and I have a water sewer backup, and I have that stuff that comes back up through the pipes. But at the same time, I have water that seeps from the ground into my home. And so my basement is also flooded. Under your homeowner's policy, there's something called concurrent causation. So you have a covered loss because you've got water sewer backup, but at the same time, you have a loss that's not covered. And because of concurrent causation, you don't get coverage at all. And I know right now that those of you that hate me, but it's better for you to know that and understand that. Now, this is a circumstance where having a flood insurance policy, you may have coverage. But remember what Donald said, if there's damage to items in the basement, there is going to be very limited coverage. So think of it this way. If you've turned your basement into a man cave, things like your heating unit and things of that type that are generally covered under flood insurance policy. This stuff is relatively complicated. That's why it's important that you speak with a trusted insurance advisor that
We've lost audio.
She's been told. Thanks for your patience, everyone. And just as a reminder, if you are interested in a breakout room that will start after Joy's done speaking, please request it in the chat. I'm just going to give her a couple more minutes, and then we could ask some Q&As if she doesn't come back in a few minutes. So while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and address the first Q&A question that came in real quick. And so this was a question in the chat. I think it was probably made clear later, but the National Flood Insurance Program doesn't cover basements or belongings inside of a basement. Can anyone address that quickly while we're waiting for Joy?
Hi, this is Donald.
Thank you, Donald.
Yeah, we have what we call limited coverage in a basement. There are certain things that we will cover, and those are things that are probably used for the risk, which would be hot water heaters. It would be if you have oil in your oil tanks in the basement for the dwelling or the house or something like that. But we will not cover furnishings. We will not cover the couches, that man cave that Joy talked about. We would not cover any of those things because we know that's primarily where the basement's going, where the water's going to be. So we would cover, we have what we call limited coverage, and it would be only those type items, but not furnishings and televisions and things of that nature.
Thanks, Donald.
Coverage too. I mean, there's another question. If you don't mind, it says, why is the coverage only up to $250,000?
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
The National Flood Insurance Program is a national program. It's a federal program. And Congress has set the limit of $250,000. So that's what Congress has. And that's what we call the statutory limit. And we can't change that. Only Congress can change that.
Thanks, Donald. That would have been one of the questions I would have asked. Just a comment that came up. This recording will be available on our webpage within a couple days. Someone had asked when the recording was going to be available.
There's another statement that says, remember, there's building and contents coverage, and not everyone has both. In the National Flood Insurance Program, you have to purchase the coverages that you want. So you would purchase your building, and you would purchase your contents coverage.
Thanks, Donald. So Leslie asked the question, how does one buy an insurance policy to make sure the contents of your basement are covered in a flood?
We don't sell coverage in the basement. Not at the National Flood Insurance Program. There may be some private companies that will sell it, private flood companies, but the NFIP does not sell coverage in a basement.
Thanks, Donald.
Just share another thing. A lot of people call, they call walkout basements, things like that. If you walk out of your house on that bottom floor and you open up the French doors, and as soon as you walk out, you're right on land, you're not in a basement. You're only in a basement when you're subgrade on all sides. And some people believe that they have walkout basements, and that's not the case with us. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. There's a question here from Victor with regards to, so this is going to be for the Prince George's County folks. Victor's asking about the well run and the drain storm between East-West Highway and Taylor Road. I had 45 inches of water in my basement because of overflow of water. DOT staff came to cut the street around these well run or ditch and left the brush over there. Can anyone address that?
Hello, this is Tyrone.
Thanks, Tyrone.
I would have to do some research on that. I don't have any information to provide him with an answer at this time.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Would you mind putting, for him, would you mind putting your email real quick in the chat so he can grab it?
I will.
Thank you. And everyone's contact information will be up soon. Again, we're still gonna wait and see if Joy is gonna come back. But we're gonna put a slide up with everybody's contact information. Is that something we could do, Joyce? Thanks. It looks like R. Cotton says most use the basement as additional living space for working, telework, laundry. Yeah, it can be hard not to have that coverage in the basement. Rosa Anderson asks, how can it be changed by law to cover basement furniture? I don't know if you want to address that or not, Donald.
The only thing I can think of is you have to talk to your congressman. It's literally, the National Flood Insurance Program is literally ran by Congress, and they're the ones who make the rules and the regulations.
Thanks, Donald. So it looks like Joy's screen is frozen. So we're just gonna go ahead with the Q&A session. We've already been doing it. This is officially the Q&A session. Just as a reminder, this is being recorded, and this is the time that we're gonna send folks out into breakout rooms. I know we have at least one request in the chat for a breakout room. We may have more. So some of you might start disappearing into your breakout rooms, and some of you are just gonna stay here. As I go through any questions that remain for the Q&A, and otherwise, if you have your questions answered, obviously, you can drop off of the call if you would like. And in the chat, Kevin Wagner pointed out, typically you can purchase flood insurance from the same company you purchase your homeowner's insurance from. And so that's through something called the Write Your Own program. So oftentimes you can just reach out to the agent that you use for your homeowner's insurance to find out information about if they write your own, if they're part of that program for flood insurance. Did you want to say anything on that, Donald?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I was correcting my name and
It's all right. I got it.
it's incorrect, and the Donald Waters is right, but the W, okay, never mind. So anyway,
Okay.
and that is true. Actually, you can probably get flood insurance from any agent that you deal with. What we suggest and what we say is anywhere it rains, it floods is insured. So if that be the case, and I love that presentation that Dawn did when she was talking about flash flooding and things like that. You'd be surprised how much damages you can get from things like that. So, but the WIO companies, the Write Your Own companies, you can contact the NFIP direct, and all of the prices should be about the same in the NFIP. But I keep telling people that they can't get flood insurance right now, but we're working on different policies. I don't know when they become effective, and that's why we really don't like talking about them. So we will be having some additional coverages and things like that. But again, once Congress, they haven't gone through rulemaking, and Congress would have to look at those things first. But we hear people's concern, and we understand that a lot of people have paid a lot of money down in those basements for their man caves and things like that. So
yeah, without a doubt. Thanks, Donald. Joy Hatchett is back on the line via phone. Joy, did you want to say anything more? My bad, she's not back yet. Paulette says, I was told that our flooding was a result of storm drains that were backed up. I live in North Brentwood. If that is the case, what is being done to correct the backup in the storm drains? Thanks, Tyrone.
Don, do you have any comment on that?
No, I do not.
No, Don Hawkins.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, thanks.
So I don't know what was told to the resident, but what I can say in general is that our storm drains are designed to carry the 10-year flow, right? The worst, anticipated amount of flow expected once in every 10 years, more or less, or any storm that has I think it's 10% chance of occurring in any given year. The storm drains are not designed to carry large volumes of flow that exceed that 10-year capacity. So whether, the storm drains were malfunctioning, or maybe it was a situation in which the storm drains were fully functional, but the flow was more than the storm drains could carry, and that resulted in flooding. So I'm not sure what the discussion was, what the findings were during the investigation of the conditions at your particular location, but it is general practice that these storm drains are not designed to carry a volume of flow such as the amount that you saw with the September 10th event.
Thanks for that. I have a question from Nicholas who says, when will the storm drainage system be reevaluated to stay ahead of the global warming trends, i.e. to ensure pumping stations are on during a flash flood situation?
What I can say about taking into consideration climate change, the county is in the process of doing a nuisance flood plan. And part of that flood plan development is to consider how climate change is impacting on the intensity of the rainstorms that we're beginning to see now and that we anticipate seeing in the future. As we go through that process and identify the higher risk exposure to these higher rainfall events, then we will start planning, how do we address it? How do we address the new situation in which we find ourselves that we had not anticipated 20 years ago when we were designing new storm drain systems. So this climate change is presenting a challenge in terms of how we move forward and providing better mitigation for anticipated stormwater runoff.
Thank you, Dawn. This next question is definitely for you, Mr. Waters. Grace says, so if Flood insurance, does it cover hot water heaters in the basement? Does it also cover laundry, the washer and the dryers?
If we do cover washers and dryers, I think you have to make sure you have contents coverage. So you would have to purchase contents coverage for that.
Thanks, Don.
Mhm.
And I believe Tyrone addressed this issue earlier. Will FEMA help us? Will FEMA help us September 10th, those who did not have flood insurance?
So as earlier discussed, while the individual or household or individual property damage that some individuals sustained, when we were able to aggregate the information that we gathered from our survey, there was not a path to seeking to submitting a viable application to FEMA for a request for what's called individual assistance. We were just not going to make what was necessary. We did not see the need to have people waiting for months for what we were not confident would succeed. The unusual phenomenon that occurred on September 10th, and Don touched on it a moment ago, and I think the question about the pumps operating also touched on that, which is an unusually heavy rainfall in a very small footprint of the county, most of which went on surface areas, streets, sidewalks around your homes. And that unusual phenomenon quickly caused flash flooding, and the water was quickly gone. In most instances, of course, what was left in your basement if your sump pump wasn't moving it out. So we just had a very unusual phenomenon, which impacted that portion of the county. And at this time, there's in FEMA, reimbursement from FEMA, as Don has pointed out, Congress sets the guidelines. It's legislative relief. At this time, there is no legislative relief that we're able to identify to assist people.
Thank you, Tyrone. The next question is from Paulette. She says, is it the recommendation that basements should not be used as living quarters or contain anything other than those things being covered? I don't know if anyone wants to take this, but Paulette, I think that you just need to know that in a flood situation, you may not have coverage. And so I think that just needs to be considered when you're deciding what to do with your basement and what to put down in your basement. Did you want to address that at all, Donald?
No, I think you did it well. You know, right now, like I know that it's really sad. We go into people's houses after a flood and we see that they put a lot in the basement. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And family out at picnics, and not picnics, but Thanksgiving dinners, and just absolutely just. But when it comes to the flood, that's the first place that's going to be damaged. So if you're going to put those things down there, you're just taking a risk. And we don't have coverage for it. And I don't know about private insurance, but I know the NFIP does not have coverage for items in that area. And that's any flood zone. So if you get a preferred risk, anything, we just do not cover personal property in a basement as defined by the NFIP.
And Patty, this is Joy. When it comes to private insurance, most of those policies will mimic the coverage that the NFIP has. So the same types of exclusions for things in the basement, you're probably going to find in the private market. The one big difference between the private market and the NFIP is the amount of coverage. As Donald mentioned, the NFIP policies are limited to $250 for the structure or 100,000 for the contents. The private carriers generally will offer you more than that. So if you happen to have a home that's worth $500,000, if you only had a NFIP policy, you would be limited to your coverage to $250,000. In the private arena, you can get one that covers either the excess or the total amount. But as for those items in the basement, those still are not going to be covered. Now, I know that Kevin has information on a lot of different things that you can do in your basement in terms of putting things up, even something as inexpensive as putting things up on shelves and things. And that's one of the things that I know his agency really stresses with homeowners.
Thanks, Joy.
And can I just follow up? Someone me a text. Someone said, if it's not covering things in the basement, then why are you going to have a policy? You know, there are other damages, and so the basement could be damaged, and other things can be damaged, but I don't know. We've seen it all, and so it's just to protect yourself. We suggest that you get a policy, and especially if you're not in a special flood hazard area. I think Howard showed you the prices. It just, and you might not get the stuff in the basement covered, but you'll have some protection. There's so many things that happens at risk, and I don't know. Insurance is to protect you and to help you, but you have to understand the exclusions and understand what it will and will not do for you. And if you don't feel it would work for you, then I understand that, but we just believe that you'll be better off with some coverage.
Thanks so much, Donald. I have a comment here from Leslie who points out September 10 was our second 100-year flood in 11 years. Yvonne asks, what should we do if the storm drains have never worked? If somebody from PG County wants to.
I'm not certain as to what is meant by never worked. So we do recommend that if residents notice that that runoff water, stormwater runoff is not being captured and conveyed by a storm drain during a small event, that they report that via 311, because if during a small rainstorm event they're seeing water back up, then that could be an indication that the storm drain is blocked somewhere along that line. Typically, most storm drains are operating. I can't say that the county knows when a storm drain is blocked at any particular location at any particular time, because there's so much or
Dawn,
so many miles.
Yvonne has a follow-up. She says she's in the community Frost subdivision, and that's specifically what she's talking about, and she's asking now who she should contact.
Yes, so I believe that there is a 311 complaint about Frost subdivision in Capitol Heights, I think. I've seen one, and it's my understanding that our team members are coordinating with the HOA on that particular complaint.
Okay. She does say that she has contacted 311, given a ticket. They sent out WSSC and nothing has been resolved to date.
Yeah, it's still being looked into. Sometimes drainage issues have to be vetted with WSSC to rule out the possibility that the flooding problem is not associated with a water line break. So that's the reason as to why WSSC is probably involved in that part of that investigation.
Thanks, Dawn.
Sure.
Grace asks, we know that climate change is going to get worse before it will get better, and we have to be proactive instead of reactive. What is the county doing to better prepare for the likely increase in these types of flooding events so that residents aren't devastated every 5 to 10 years?
So earlier this year, the county council passed a resolution requiring or first setting up a climate action commission to develop a climate action plan. The commission convened in October of this year and will continue to work on the development of that climate action plan over the course of the next year. So the commission meets, well, they will meet this month in December. The meetings can be viewed online. The county council makes those meetings available. And one of the issues that are topics that are being addressed by the future plan will be climate resiliency and adaptation.
Thanks, Dawn. And along the same lines, Paulette says, if the amount of rain occurs again, should we expect the same? Should we not expect this type of rain within the next 10 years or 100 years?
So, yeah, and I might need Kevin to help me out here. When, you know, traditionally we've talked about the 100-year event, we've talked about the 10-year event. But over the course of the last few years, we've kind of, we've realized how that terminology, what message it conveys to the public. So we want to now explain better what is meant or what was meant by the 100-year event and the 10-year event. The 100-year event has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year, 1% chance. It can occur this year, it could occur next year, it could occur the following year. It just has a 1% chance of occurring. A small chance, but that chance is still there. So we can't rule out that a rainfall amount that's considered that 100-year rainfall amount won't occur again next year. We can't rule that out because that risk is always there.
Thanks, Dawn. These are questions from R. Cotton. The Edmonston pump was not on/working on September 10, 2020. Can we make sure the pump is working as it should? And he continues, when the Edmonston pumping station is on and working, we have not had an incident like September 10. That was it.
I also added in more than a decade.
Yes.
Tyrone, I guess that's a question for Department of Public Works. I'm not, they manage the pump station, so I don't.
I'm sorry, could this question be restated just a little for me?
I can read it for you. When the pumping station, the Edmonston pumping station is on and working, we've not had an incident like September 10th in more than a decade with rain events that were more severe. So can we make sure that the station is on and functioning?
Okay, so my understanding in interacting with Public Works is that the pumping stations performed the way they're supposed to. They're designed to pump based on water levels in the river or in the dry well that's in the station. As we've noted more than once during this discussion, if urban, what's I think is referred to as urban flooding, if the accumulation of water on the paved surfaces, streets, sidewalks, and around homes is overwhelmed before that water can move into the storm drain, which is the phenomenon of, it did not seem as if the storm drains were moving the water away, which has to go with what Don and Kevin described to us, just with the heavy volume of water in 2 hours. Essentially, the surface areas were overwhelmed with water before the river levels rose. So it's not that they weren't working. It's just simply the design of them is to keep, is to focus on water rise in the river. And with our changing environment, I guess, there are just some new phenomenon. And I would suspect that the commission that Don has talked about, and I know from other conversations with Don, that we just have to begin to reimagine how we're able to manage some of the water runoff from significant storms.
Are you aware the Army Corps of Engineers designed this particular station, the Edmondson Pumping Station, to handle the September 10th event and more? As I said, we haven't had an incident in more than a decade. And I personally witnessed that as soon as the pumping station was put in operation, the water went away. So that's the question. I hear what you said, but you didn't address the question.
Well, actually, I think I'm trying to say it in a different way, but consistent with what you said, which water rise in the river automatically kicks in the pumping stations. Apparently, from my understanding from from Public Works, is that the sudden water rise in the streets does not automatically kick on the pumping station. It was not designed to operate that way. And again, Public Works, I believe they've had some town halls as well. They would be better at answering that question for you, or I can follow up with them for you. But that is my regurgitation of the understanding I was given.
Well, as someone who witnessed the event and who suffered a loss as a result of the event, and who was on scene when the emergency first responders were there, and I'm telling you, the pumping station was not in operation.
I'm not doubting what you're telling me, sir. I'm just trying to.
Could I perhaps comment? Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
So I too live adjacent to the Edmondson pumping station, and I've attended several meetings with PG County's DPW. They claim that they turned on the pumping station manually at 1 p.m. on September 10th. Okay. When the automatic pump didn't turn on due to river level rising. However, I do not believe them because, as I said, I live directly adjacent to it. And I had about 2 feet of water in my backyard, 6 feet of water in my basement. And when the pumps did turn on around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the water level decreased in the surrounding areas within about half an hour.
I concur.
Okay.
And I have photos with timestamps.
And again, I'm not doubting I'm not doubting what you're saying at all. I can only go on the explanation that I received, which seems to be similar to what the explanation that you received is. And we would have to follow up with Public Works. It's just something I can't answer for you or provide better explanation at this time.
I just want to make sure that the station is on and functioning. And the Army Corps of Engineers recommended that someone be there physically to make sure that it is. That's all I'm asking. That's my question. We just need to make sure the pumping station is functioning as it was designed to do. Because it can handle what we handle, what we had on September 10th. It can more than handle. As I said, we
Mr.
haven't
Cotton?
had an incident like this in over a decade.
Mr. Cotton, we're going to wrap this up in 1 minute. So last question. Mr. Wells?
Oh, I was just going to say that with storms that provide an unusual amount of rain and perhaps is not forecast as well, they don't necessarily have people there. If we know a storm, or if they know a storm is a significant storm is headed this way, they do staff it in advance. And again, the particular situation on that day prior to the deluge that we received, I don't know what that is. Public Works would, and we would still have to loop back to them. But it is their practice for forecast heavy rains to staff the stations. I do know that to be accurate.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Wells.
And that is going to conclude, it's 7 o'clock. That's going to conclude this town hall meeting for tonight. You should see on your screen the contact information. So for those of you that do have outstanding questions, leave it up. I'm going to leave it up here for a minute. If you can grab that information and send it to whoever it is you have the question for. As well, this will be posted in its entirety on our webpage. I thank all of you for being here today. I hope you got your questions answered, or at least most of your questions answered. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joy, see you later, Joy.
Yeah. Bye Donald, thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Patty.
everyone.
I enjoyed it.
That's good.
Although my slides didn't work.
This was great. Thanks, Patty, for asking my questions.
You're welcome. All right. Bye everyone.